Okay, good. What are you guys here for government class?
No, they came to see the same DNA show.
Well, they're gonna see it, and I want you to put on a good one because I know this little girl right here. This is Miss Teen Sparks, right? Okay, so with that being said, we're gonna kick off the meeting, and Lily, I would love for you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good job. All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Breckus. Here. Dorr.
Did you say doer? Here.
Delgado. Here. Weber. Absent at this time. Jardin. Here. Reese.
Here.
Mayor, you do have a quorum of the Reno City Council.
All right, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to send it back to you, Madam Clerk, for public comment.
Our first public commenter is Sam Dene.
All right, here we go, Sam. Don't disappoint.
Have I ever disappointed you, Hillary, Ms. Mayor? Sam, DNA, Dene, that's me. The heart and soul and the body and mind of Reno government. I'm responsible for 92% of the good things about Reno. And I've said that for the last 5 years, and nobody ever comes up, and we have these youngsters here, nobody ever disagrees with me. So I'm responsible for 92% of the good things about Reno. And see that clock right up there? That's the Sam DNA, Dene. Don't give him 1 extra second of freedom of speech clock. When I arrived, there was no clock. Now we got this clock. And I'm an Air Force. I got a quick background for the new people in the audience. And if I'd known there was such a big audience, I would have brought my guitar and we would have really had some good time. But anyway, I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I spent many years flying B-52 bombers and F-4 Phantoms defending our nation against enemies inside of the borders and outside of the borders. And ever since 1993, way before these front row audience was even born, I've been to every single Reno City Council meeting since before you were born. Well, I missed 2 or 3. Pretty darn close. Now what we have right here, ladies and gentlemen, is we have some special audience of students from Reno High and I guess Sparks High. We've got Ashton and Emma over there. And Professor Schuweiler, I'm here to verify that they are at the meeting. They have my business cards to verify that also. I invited them to come up and speak, but I told them they were live television, and I said, this is your chance, live television. At any rate, this is the start of the Sam DNA show, and they can see that I'm the nicest guy, as nice as a person as they've ever met in their lives. They thought they were coming to a budget meeting. They're coming to the Sam DNA show. And I love everybody in this community. I love everybody, even my enemies, except for one entity, one evil entity. And I'm sure you've all seen Donald Trump and his fake media. Well, here in Reno, we've got the Scaredy Cat media, the Scaredy Cat Reno Gazette, all of the television stations, scared to death of this 160-pound senior citizen. Trump, if you're listening, release Sam DNA's YouTubes. I have thousands of YouTubes out there, and the media is scared to look at them and show people what's going on. Did you get that? I know you're watching, Don, so I want you. You know Don Trump, right? I've got more spunk and gumption and moxie, natural charisma, and better hair than him. But he's an okay guy. He's not my favorite guy. And a nice smiley face from the mayor. And so there's the clock running out. And I invited these young young adults up to come to the podium and say hi to the professor to verify that we're here. But I already did that for them. And I'll be back here in a few minutes to analyze a few things about the budget. And I'm responsible for all the budgets that we've had historically.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks,
You're
Sam.
Our next public commenter is Bob Conrad.
Hello.
Is this on?
It is.
All right. My name is Bob Conrad. I'm with This is Reno, and I watched I believe it was last week, maybe the last meeting that you had, and wanted to chat just briefly about this issue of public records and fees. I am a member of this coalition called Right to Know Nevada, which is the Kenny Gwynn Center for Policy Priorities, ACLU, NPRI, and I think most all of the Nevada media outlets. So it's all about advocating for open government. Last I heard, that bill is still in play, and I suspect we'll get an update soon on that one. And I do believe there was some concern expressed about the extraordinary use of staff time in regards to how that gets played out in terms of charging the public for fees. So I did want to bring your attention to a recent court order that there was a local entity that tried to charge more than that 50 cents a page, and they were ordered by a judge to not do that, so I will leave this with you. The Nevada Public Records Act, since I believe 2013, indicates that you may not charge more than 50 cents a page. So, and that's only after extraordinary use of staff time has been determined. I know there's been some talk about incorporating staff time in generating what those fees might be, but it's my understanding as a former public records officer and now a news person that you may no longer do that. So I just wanted to bring those issues to your attention. Another point that is spelled out in the Nevada Public Records Act manual is that public records fees are not meant to be revenue generating. So I believe it was a pretty striking finding to see that the city had collected more than $250,000 in public records fees in the last year. So I don't know how that gets determined legally, but I will leave that to you and just say that in closing, hopefully these points will be considered as you approve your fee schedule. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.
You bet.
There's no further public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion from Councilwoman Dewar, a second from Councilman Delgado. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, I'm going to send it back to you, Madam Clerk. Okay, this is item V1, staff report and presentation, discussion and direction to staff regarding the fiscal year 1920 budget for the city of Reno. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. This is a continuation of the meeting we had last week, so I'll just jump right in. There were some changes that we were requested to make, and that's what we're going to bring forward, and then we're going to continue to go through some of the other funds. Bless you. So what we have done since the last meeting is we've made some adjustments to be able to add 4 new police officers plus the 12 police officers, 4 vehicles to make sure that they can do their jobs. They need vehicles to go with them, and the uniforms, equipment, and other stuff. We are keeping the deputy chief of police in the budget. We've added a fire EMS program manager plus a vehicle. We've added some funding to program the city plaza, and we've reduced some funding for special events for those events that are currently subsidized by the city, and we've maintained the funding for the Safer Grant match. So, so the additional cost to the budget was just a little under $1.6 million. And how we came up with that is we are doing a staggered start of the police officers. We currently have 10 going into the academy in July, August timeframe. And so we didn't feel we would be able to get a whole nother 12.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Jordan, is that you? Councilwoman Jordan, is that you?
Yes. Picking up about, I don't know how the others are on the phone, but I'm picking up about every 4th word, and it's very soft.
Oh, sir. Yeah, it might be.
I've never had that problem before.
Speak a little louder, maybe.
Okay, well, and I would rely on my IT folks to get it a little louder, because I can't speak much louder. How we came up with the additional $1.6 million is we have done a staggered start for the police officers. We currently have 10 police officers going into the academy right after the start of the fiscal year, and didn't feel like we would have a great pool of available people to add another 12. And so we will add 6 in July and another 6 in January. And through attrition, that'll make the January academy, it'll be more than 6. So we'll be looking at how many we can get into the January academy. We've reclassed an existing lieutenant position to a deputy chief of police. We replaced the fire inspector position with an EMS program manager. We provided for the one-time funding to program City Plaza, and then we've also, you'll see in another slide, provided an option for council to reduce the special events budget. In addition, we removed the dispatcher. We removed the senior management analyst from neighborhood services. We removed the deputy chief. We had a fully funded deputy chief of police. We actually changed it to now reclassing an existing position. We shifted the police overhire program to funded positions, and we've reduced the RDA subsidy to the baseball agreement. With all of these adjustments, that left the general fund. We still needed $227,000, and in the room tax fund, we still need $268,000. And so on the next slide, this is where the council gets to make a couple recommendations for us. So for the general fund, we need $227,000 to balance it. And the options we have are we can remove the 2 park rangers, or we can remove the senior planner and the contract money for the economists and engineering. So those are they're about equal in cost for those 2 options, and this is a point where we would like the council to tell us which option they would like us to continue to put in the budget.
You want these decisions as we go?
Yes, please.
So, Madam Mayor?
Yes, go.
So my question, right before we started to our manager was, why in option B are these the 3 options? The senior planner, the economist, and the engineer? And the reason I recalled that we had quite a few other positions. And what she said was that most of those were all out of dedicated funds that aren't in the general fund, and the police officers are in the general fund so we're looking for positions. So in the general fund too, or something to take out of the general fund. So my question is, are there any other positions in the general fund besides these that are also on the table?
Well, I suppose there's the risk manager.
Okay.
This was really the options we picked, as
Yeah.
they're essentially equal in dollar amount.
I understand.
They're both adds to the budget that we don't currently have. So that's why these were the ones that were brought forward.
Right, but since we have to make a choice, I just wanted to know what are all the things on the table that we can choose from? I understand this is your recommendation, but what are the other options?
There's a lot of things that were added, and I would have to go through and see which ones are
Well,
general
I've got the
fund and
handout
which
that
ones
you
aren't.
gave us last time, which was the manager recommended budget. And just turning to that, I was just looking for the list of positions. So the first one came to your mind was a risk manager.
That's because that's the one that's in my department.
Of
that I know.
course.
But it's not,
Although-
again, that's not risk funded. I mean, that's
Ms.
funded
Lochner-
through risk. And a lot of the other positions are funded through revenue that they're bringing in. So there's not a lot that were unencumbered with other I the risk manager is funded through the risk funds. I don't remember what all those positions are.
Well, I mean, you're asking us to choose, but you're also narrowing our choice. So I just want to make sure that I fully understand what we get to choose from.
Right. City Manager Sabra Newby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the risk manager position is slightly problematic because I think that was coming out of the risk fund and workers' comp fund, perhaps.
That's true.
In part, so that is non-general fund. But a couple of the other positions off the top of my head would be the,
Why don't I help you? I
Sure.
just turned to your recommendation from last time, and you have a senior planner in CD, you have citizen service rep in neighborhood services, an office assistant neighborhood services, parking enforcement officer, which I think you're calling price neutral, a senior management analyst. You have a park maintenance worker to a head pool operator, the 2 park rangers that you've already identified, the senior rec leader and the program assistant, and then you also have another senior rec leader going from part-time to full-time, senior management analyst and sustainability, and senior analyst in grants management. That's just, and here's more, a fire inspector 1, firefighter safer grant, we already talked about the deputy chief, the 4 officers. So I'm just looking at, I just want to make sure I know what we have to pick from.
so I think, for the record, Saber Newby.
Yeah.
Miss Mayor, if you don't mind me jumping in here.
Go right ahead.
So there were a couple of things that we looked at. First of all, we were looking for general fund dollars. So we already talked about that. Second of all, we were looking to avoid those positions that had some sort of source of funding that would get some funding, right? So, for example, you mentioned the parking enforcement person who would be technically out there giving citations, so there would be some revenue offset. Likewise, for the parks positions, one of the additions is to open up a new school site. And so that would be our Safe Key, or rather Sierra Kids program is revenue generating. So we didn't think that it was prudent to cut a position for which that generated revenue. So what you're left with, if you want to cut other things that are purely non-revenue generating, and from that list that you already, I'm kind of at a disadvantage because I don't have it in front of me, but the senior management analyst was already, the senior management analyst in neighborhood services was already cut. The senior, so number 1 on that list, the senior planner in CD, that is already on the list. That is in option B. So that's already on there. The citizen service rep, you could certainly cut that as somebody who answers calls and requests from citizens on Reno Direct. The office assistant 2, you could cut if you wanted to. That person was going to take over the parking management program from the clerk's office. So if we didn't have that position, it would need to stay with the clerk. The parking enforcement officer, I think there's revenue generating off of that, so I wouldn't suggest that you do that. The next position, senior management analyst, has already been cut. The inclusion behavior specialist, that's really small dollars. It's only 0.25 persons. The park maintenance worker is the person that we use to go out and leverage all of the court-ordered service folks who pick up our parks. So we feel that that's pretty important to leverage those extra hours. The head pool operators, that is, again, just a change of 10 hours. Then you get into the park rangers, they are already on this list. The senior rec leader, that's only a portion of a position as well. The, let's see, the program assistant, that's in civil service, and you could cut that if you wanted to. Also, in finance, the 2 positions there are non-general fund. In CMO, the rec leader, actually, I don't know why that's under CMO, because I don't think it
That's
is.
in special events.
Oh, got it. The senior rec leader, again, that's only 10 extra hours. The sustainability and grants management, we had tried to combine that position into one, just as a MA, but you could certainly take that one. Fire inspector, that's general fund as well. The safer grant, that's
And the
pending
fire
award.
inspector, we already cut.
Oh, that's right. The fire inspector in this proposal is the EMS coordinator. Deputy chief of police, we cut that and scaled it back to, it's still a deputy chief of police, but it's a reclassification at this point. You have 12 officers, so that replaces the 4 officers and the trainee. The maintenance tech then in Public Works really is just 0.2 of a position, and it's shared between street and sewer. So there's really not much to be gained there.
Right.
And
So,
the
And that's
dispatcher
really
was
going
cut
through
as-
all of the
Right, and the
positions.
dispatcher was also cut.
Yeah.
Right, yes, I thought I mentioned that.
so you already cut the dispatcher and you already cut the fire inspector?
We turned the dispatcher along with other funds into a police officer.
And the fire inspector got turned into the fire EMS coordinator.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
this is Jenny Reckes. I see where we're trying to go. I think that one of the positions to cut would be, to get these additional officers and the vehicles, would be the park rangers. It's a new initiative that frankly I thought was going to save police officer time. We talked about it a lot during the spring budget workshops, but you know, if it comes between new initiatives and our core value, and that's where the majority goes, that's where I would land. Also, I think the senior management analyst for sustainability, I think that I would put that on the table to cut instead of the senior planner, because the senior planner is going to help us advance the master plan. And then the third one I would put on is, frankly, I would pull the affordable housing money off the table. I just got the update from the Silver Sage Dorms project. We put a lot of money into that this past year, into the Hopes project. Let's let those 2 initiatives come on this year, see and reap what we put in over the last year as these projects roll out, and then next year see where we think we need to land on that, and if we've given any new tools from the legislature. So those are the 3 that I would say: the rangers, the senior management analysts for the grants, for the sustainability, and the housing trust, or the housing money to get the rest. And also, I object to reducing the RDA subsidy for baseball, because that's a signed contract, and if we don't pay it, it's going to be loading onto debt, and I don't think we should load that onto debt. Thank you.
So
Okay.
just to clarify,
Thank you.
the reduction in RDA is because the RDA revenue is coming in and we don't need the general fund to subsidize. We are still paying that payment.
Okay. That was what I was going to ask. And then, Deborah, what about the NV Energy payments? Have we started receiving those, and do we know
So
what those
with
will look like?
NV Energy, we're still in discussions on the results of the audit and what we can and can't charge them for, and that's going to take some time to work through.
Okay. I know. You know, when you're desperate, you'll just look
And
for
Madam
anything.
Manager, just to clarify, we just need the 2 park rangers, right? All these
So,
things.
yeah, this is A or B.
Right.
Either the 2 park rangers or the senior plan and the 2 amounts we put in for
I mean, we
contracts.
could leave the the sustainability management assistant we don't even need it, or the money in affordable housing.
I suppose you could change the senior planner for the senior management analyst.
I
but
think that
again,
was
I
the
think it's-
suggestion from Ms. Breckus, was to sub out the senior planner for the senior MA.
Yeah.
So does that leave 2, so now I would imagine that leaves 2 fire inspectors, is that right? I think someone
There-
from fire that's probably here that could, right?
They have
You
more
2?
than 2 fire inspectors.
How many do you have? How many?
I believe they have,
12?
Madam Mayor, I think it's 8. Is it 8?
8 fire inspectors?
Excuse me, in the, sorry, Dave Cochran, Reno Fire Chief. In the budget or currently employed, current FTEs?
Currently, and what are you supposed to have?
We have, when you put them all together, we have about 14 or 15 in that division, between inspectors, a mechanic captains, a fire marshal, we have a hydrant person, plans examiners, that sort of thing.
Okay, so they're all.
So there was one recommended in the budget,
Oh, okay. And then, but you changed that to EMS?
right? Because that's our biggest need right now. If we're looking at a single position, that is the one single position that would make the biggest difference.
Okay. All All right. Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go right ahead.
thank you. So we have approximately, I think, 400 and something $1,000 that remains in that affordable housing fund, correct?
Correct.
425,000.
Okay, so the suggestion is to not raise it back up to the $1 million like we did last year, or is it to hold that for whatever back into the future? I'm trying to understand
So-
if we're going to move
Right.
it out to nothing, because I think it's done some really good things. Now, if we wanted to lower it from the million, I'm open to that, but I think projects like the dorms and tiny homes could be game changers on the affordable housing front for most vulnerable, so I'd hate to see it zeroed out.
So if I can interject, the affordable housing is a different fund, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, we're talking about the general fund, and we needed to come up with $227,000 to balance the general fund, and we are suggesting either option A or option B here. There has been a suggestion from one council member to substitute the senior management analyst in sustainability for the senior planner that's in option B.
Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, could someone email me again the option A, option B? I can't see it.
Sure.
Sure. If we have staff that can email her the PowerPoint presentation, the options that we're looking at are on slide 5 of that presentation.
Okay. Councilman Delgado.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to also thank staff. You guys put in quite a bit of work to get us to where we are today with all the recommendations from last time. In terms of the numbers with now total numbers of Reno PD, where does that put us? I know there's always a delay and so forth, but in terms of just clarity, how many is that going to put us down total for RPD with these additions?
12.
Well, it's
With the
adding
additional-
12, and I forget how many the chief said he had last meeting, but
Yeah, looking for a total
Chief
number.
Benzon is coming
Chief
up.
Benzon will come up and.
And I'm going to ask the same for fire.
For the record, Mac Venzon, Deputy Chief. Currently, we have 327, so with what's in the proposal, the budget would be 340 total.
340 total. And those new positions that we're adding, those 12 with the vehicles, those are going to be, those are 2 teams?
2 teams, correct.
2 teams, okay. And that's going to add how many more patrol to our, once they're all trained and all that good stuff, how many more are we supposedly now looking in terms of serving our community in patrol? Does that change the shifts? Does that change the amount of people out there, or what's the community going to
Certainly
do?
will change the number of folks on the street with some options to maybe bump up some traffic. I mean, we haven't really talked through the exact numbers about where we're going to place people, but I would anticipate that 10 of those would go to patrol for sure.
Okay.
And then the 2 of them to farm out to different locations.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, if I may. In discussions with Chief Soto leading up to today, he and I did discuss if the council wishes to remove the 2 park rangers, that potentially one of the additional positions could be assigned to the Community Action Office, specifically for the river area. Currently, there's 1 officer that does that work. And so we had talked about maybe adding a 2nd officer. I know it may or may not make up for the 2 park rangers, but it is something that he and I discussed because the river is important to us and we recognize it as an issue. The second thing I want to point out is with the 6 additional officers, we've already authorized 10 officers now to go through the next academy. So potentially we're looking at 16 officers going through this upcoming academy in July.
Great. And that was leading into my question with respect to, I know when we did all the cutbacks that we've had to also step away from certain initiatives or certain programming that we were doing. And so that was my question is, are we going to restart up some of those community initiatives that we've seen great outcomes for in terms of community outreach?
Again,
with
Mac
the
Venzon,
additional.
for the record, yes and no. I think one of the core components of the police department is the patrol division. And so our hope is to really bolster up the patrol section and make sure that that has what it needs, and then start to look at where the other needs are, and then add those folks into there.
And these are all police officers that are going to be post, right?
Correct. All
Okay.
certified,
No civilian. Okay. Thank you for that. Our fire, please. Sorry, Madam Mayor. These are just clarity questions that I know when I go out to the community, they'll be asking, what are those numbers now in addition to, yes, Chief?
So just a brief summary, and if you benchmark it across the time that I've been chief, when I started, we had 254 funded positions. That includes 213 line firefighters. We now have 257 funded positions. We've added 2 fire inspectors and a mechanic. So we have not added a firefighter during my tenure. And it's a little challenging sometimes to talk about what's the most important. When I said one position would make the most difference, in EMS, one body would, but we'd have.
So in a quick summary, Chief, what is the EMS manager going to do for the department, and where is that taking us forward in terms of what we're looking as an agency?
The primary focus is going to be training, educating. That includes teaching, developing classes, putting classes together, and then our quality assurance and quality improvement program, which we're using on a subcontract, or we're accomplishing on a subcontract basis now. But that's an incredibly important part of what we do because of the volume of VMS calls that we have.
Perfect. Thank you. And this question's for so the BFAC money, does that not, what does BFAC cover? What positions within the community development department?
So the Building Enterprise Fund primarily funds the building inspectors, the fire inspectors that are related to doing building inspection. It funds a portion of planners and, of course, a portion of the director.
Okay. And we've tapped that out as much as we can in terms of positions that
Well,
we
in
need.
terms of the positions we currently have and the duties that they are doing, we can't push more building enterprise funds into that.
And the only way we can have access to that fund is if the legislature allows us to do so. Is that right?
Yes, and you know, the money in that fund really has been collected based on development fees and
Sure.
associated costs, so you know,
Yeah, but
that's.
but the question is, a
It's-
change is legislatively
Yeah,
enacted. Okay.
it really does require a change in the legislature in order for us to use those funds for anything else.
And so, Madam Mayor, this is just, I'll end up with this, is I think our staff has done a tremendous job in trying to provide what we need and what we've asked for. We've done a few things. We've made sure we secured safety for our region, and that's what we've all hear constantly at all the different meetings. The housing piece, I think, is essential. I think Councilwoman Breckes' point is clear in terms of the senior planner moving that piece forward, because that's the other hot topic. We hear that all the time. And it's advancing the other positions that city manager had already stated in terms of keeping those revenue generating ones that we know are essential. And so, I mean, and it's not changing the subsidy piece. So I think option A is definitely one that's striking out to me as definitely something that we can leverage moving forward without getting too messy into the weeds about what we need to do in order to provide services in our region. But those are just my 2 pieces, and I appreciate the time, and sorry for the long questions.
Thank you for your comments,
And
Councilman.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to say this is really hard. I mean, anytime that you're diving into a budget like this, and of course, you know, I want to apologize, you know, Wednesday, I got, you know, really, I guess, a nice word to be passionate about the budget. And I wanted to say, you know, I think this entire council is really grateful that you guys went back, Saber and Deborah went back and really kind of, you had to make some really tough decisions. And I know that it was probably really, really painful, but I want to say, you know, thank you so much. I know that it wasn't easy. It's not easy, because people essentially, you know, it's their jobs, and we understand that. You know, the challenge that we're faced with, obviously, is, you know, the city is growing so fast and our infrastructure, you know, needs a lot of work. But at the same time, you know, all of us, I think, feel really passionate about keeping our city safe and bringing on more police officers. And that's the #1 priority, I think, of this council. And so I just want to reiterate, I don't think it's easy at all, but I want to commend you for being brave and saying, you know, this is how we get there. It really is, it is commendable, because it isn't easy. And there's some things in here that, of course, we all want. And it's really hard to make those decisions, what stays, what goes. and to, you know, put them on the chopping block. I just want you to know, you know, to our city manager and Deborah, that you really have taken on a tough task, and we really appreciate you hearing us. So thank you so much. I would, if any other council members on the phone want to weigh in at this time, I would say please do. If not, I'm going to entertain a motion.
I'd like to weigh in if I could.
Go ahead.
This is Councilmember Breakfast. I appreciate the comment on the Building Enterprise Fund, but I think that there are other options, but that's a conversation for another day and something that staff needs to map out, alternative to legislative changes. So I'll leave it at that, but I want to confirm, one, that we feel this is a fiduciary, a responsible budget. It's the biggest add-on we've had since I've been on the council, more so than we had that quote surplus. And second, I am particularly nervous about not adding a dispatcher. Those women, and they are all women, I think we only have one man, are working just under incredible duress. And as we add more officers, they've got more people on the other side they have to navigate around. And I think if there's any way we can get there from another position, hopefully not the planner one, we need to find a way to get there, even if it's cobbling some of these part-time and small positions together. The dispatchers really help the officers we're adding do the job. And I'd even say maybe if we have to do something with the EMS officer to make this room, because, you know, we've gone to the safety grant. But I'd like to hear the manager's thoughts on the dispatch position.
I think those are great comments, Councilwoman Breckus. Go ahead, City Manager, and then I'm going to call up Deputy Chief Mac Benzon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree that we need more dispatchers, and that's why we had initially put one in. If the direction from council is to add another one, I think that we would just need to go back and rejigger some things and try and make that happen. This is the council's budget, so if you would like to add back in a dispatcher, we had just repurposed it really to get another police officer.
Deputy Chief, you want to?
Yes, ma'am.
I would imagine, kind of give me your thoughts on dispatch. I think Councilwoman Breckus was.
Yeah, I think Mac Benzon, for the record, I think Councilmember Breckus is right on point. I mean, certainly is a position that sees a lot of turnover, is very stressful. There's no two ways about that. I do know that as of today, in a meeting that I was at this morning, we learned that dispatch is fully staffed for the first time in several years anyway. That they have,
good job.
Yeah, they've had with the change in civil service rules and the way that civil service is doing testing and ongoing testing, it's worked out really well for dispatch right now.
Yep.
But I can't disagree with Councilmember Breckus. Again, I hesitate to provide my opinion on what this council should do with the budget, but it's hard to argue with those points.
Okay, go ahead, Vice Mayor Dewar.
Yeah, I know that, I know that Councilwoman Breckus mentioned the sustainability person, but I guess they've been operating under a grant, right, Madam Manager? And you were trying to transition them to a full-time position?
There is, yes, Councilwoman, there is someone that is operating in that division.
Yeah.
Who is currently covered by a grant that is expiring.
Yeah.
At the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. So so I guess my question is it possible to get another grant? I hate losing the expertise, like they've already trained and worked with our sustainability person, and they are only one person, and we've given them like 5 programs. You know, we have like, I don't even, re-energize Reno, we have the green buildings, we have the, the list goes on, the mayor's compact, this, that. I mean, there's a lot of things that one person would be doing. So I don't know, is there a way to get the job done without adding a position?
Perhaps we can ask Ms. Barker. She, I think, was the one that applied for the grant funding to support the position in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think there are a couple issues. One is that the council has passed a number of ordinances, resolutions that really require a full-time position.
Right.
And Suzanne Linfonde, who's filled that position for the past year and a half, she's really built our commercial building program. The commercial building sector is the largest generator of greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're serious about reducing emissions in our community, we need to continue that program. And so we could get a grant, but if we, that's not 100%. If the council at this point in time decides that we're going to pursue a grant instead of funding that position as a permanent position, we are probably going to be, frankly, in a position where we may lose a very valuable employee because she has a family to support.
I'm bringing it up because it was already mentioned, so I just wanted to continue the thought before we dropped it, and just find out.
I do think that, this is an issue of the council deciding whether or not we really want to tackle climate change as a community. And one person, myself, I cannot implement the program.
That's how I see it. I think we've taken on so much that it's taking two people. So do we have an office assistant too in neighborhood services?
So, Councilmember Dewar, if I'm assuming that what you're looking to get at is the funding for for a dispatcher?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't know off the top of my head how much that was. I want to say it was a little over $100,000. We could probably get there by adding on, I think there was already discussion of cutting or doing option A. The economist contract and the engineering contract in option B are both $50,000 apiece. I think you could get reasonably there.
Really close.
That gets us close enough that I think staff could make that work if that is your direction.
To keep the dispatcher.
To add on a dispatcher, to add back a dispatcher,
I think it makes sense, personally.
If I could weigh in.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, our city manager, we have I think 50,000 in there as for Reno Works, correct?
Not in this.
Well, not in that. But
Ms. Lochner,
For Reno Works, there was a contract for their customer relations management system.
no, you're thinking Reno Direct. She's
Reno
talking
Direct.
Reno Works, which is out of hand.
Right.
And it would have been just a line item that could have just continued. Ms. Jordan, we'd probably need to have somebody look into that a little bit further to make sure that that's still there as an ongoing item. I don't know if we can have staff do that real quick.
Okay, if somebody could do that, because I do know for this year, Reno Works is good. The private sector has stepped up, and my understanding is that we are funded for the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
So if we needed to, I can't believe I fully am saying this, understanding that it may be very much back on the table next year. I hope not, that it continues to be funded by the public sector. But I want to see the sustainability person stay on, and I want the dispatcher, and I want 12 police officers. So I'm trying to think of the initiatives that I have started in the past that are flying on their own now, that maybe we could shift some money over to get us where we need to be.
So with on this particular general fund option, and we're looking at option B, the city manager had recommended maybe reducing the two contracts, keeping the senior planner, reducing the two contracts. And if we need a little bit more, maybe we can look and see if there's some funding in the Reno Works, but not maybe take all of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, think we're real close there with the $100,000, and I think we can get there.
Okay.
Without having to cut something else.
This is Councilmember Breckus. I've given a lot to that economist role, and I think that it is a building enterprise fund eligible scope of work, probably with the EPS that did a lot of our early analysis on the Reno Master Plan, because it is giving us the data set to understand and tell our story about how many lots we have that are ready to build houses, how many homes we have being built at any given time, and give us the understanding to be able to understand when development projects come forward if we're tight or not, or if the problem is on the market side. And so it's very directly related to the building fees that are paid. So I think as that representative to the Building Enterprise Fee Advisory Committee, I would bring that proposal forward to them to consider and then recommend to us the use out of that fund.
All right, Councilman Breckus, I think that's a fantastic idea.
And
City
we just
manager
would have to
saying-
make sure that we looked at the scope of services that they're doing and ensure it fits within the Building Enterprise Fund, but I think we can get a lot of that work done there.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Breckus. Really appreciate that. Let me ask you this. This will probably be for our city manager. Creating the risk management office. We have not had a risk management office for how long?
Gosh, that predates me. Is it 5-6 years? I'm looking to the attorneys because it's my understanding is when it was done away with, much of the work shifted over to the CAO's office.
I want to say, for the record, John Shipman, City Attorney's Office, I want to say it was either 2009 or 2011. It was right at the height of the recession, and yeah, the office came into the City Attorney's Office at that point in time.
Oh, okay. So right now it's not a position already. We don't have someone currently serving that position, correct?
We have, I mean, three people serving in there. We've got Mark Hughes, we've got Christine Felch doing the
I
administrative
know,
piece.
Carl, you're going to hate me for this. Can this, what about coming out of, don't you have a separate budget for that? Couldn't that come out of your budget?
So
I know, he's like, no.
just to clarify, the risk.
I'm just, you know me, calling the elephant out in the room. I don't mean to, I mean, we're all trying to figure it all out. It's just one of those things, we haven't had it since 2009.
Right.
I get why we exactly need it.
So to clarify, the risk manager is funded through the risk fund so it is not a general fund obligation. So it's funded through workers' comp and risk.
Got it. Okay.
And Madam Mayor, I think it's important to just clarify that a lot of the work that the city reverted to doing in the downturn was really dealing with claims as they came in the door. The risk manager position, as we've conceived of it, is really to try and be more proactive about preventing the claims in the first place and better managing our risk spend.
Yeah. I know. I understand it's so important. It really is. It's so hard to pick and choose. This isn't, one is less relevant than the other. That's really what's so difficult about it. Because I think on all levels, I think what people forget is in the recession, we laid off, I think it was about 700 employees.
Well,
and we're trying to claw our way back.
Yeah, and it's a
So
very
when we start
difficult
picking
thing,
them
and you
apart-
can't actually restore back to where you were exactly because the way of doing business has changed since the recession, and there's a lot of other things that have come in to help us do our jobs because of the recession. So while we look at the pre-recession and post-recession, it's not necessarily a fair comparison to the way business is done now. So what I have so far on this decision is that you would choose option A to come up with your $227,000. But you also want a dispatcher, so you've asked that the economist contract get funded through the building fund, and that we reduce the engineering contract, and if we can't make it balanced, that we can look to see if there's some funding available in Reno Works.
I have a question. I was a little unclear with the discussion on the Affordable Housing Fund or the, do we have 700, 400, or zero?
So currently, there is $425,000 remaining.
Yeah.
Of which I believe a portion came from a couple other funds, CDBG, and I forget the other fund, but we have to carefully use those funds. But So there's like 375,000 that you could use for anything, and there's a little bit that needs to be fit within the requirements of those other funding
But that's what
sources.
we would have for next fiscal year.
So we
would
will-
roll over the
We're
balance.
going to get there. That's coming next.
Well, but I guess I'm asking now.
The
because-
next slide. Let me go
Oh,
there.
go to the next slide.
So then, when we looked at the room tax, so if you remember this slide here, this is the, this one. You remember this was the room tax slide we discussed last Wednesday. So if you just go up to from where we were. Did you lose your copy?
From last year?
No.
Today's copy?
It's in the current
today's
copy.
I have it right here.
Okay.
It's on slide 8.
Yes, so what we had recommended, 700,000 going to the Affordable Housing Fund. What we have as the decision slide is we needed $268,000 from the room tax fund to fund the safety equipment. So that's going to be the vehicles and the equipment needed for the safety officers that we have added. It's an allowed up to $500,000, 1/3 of the revenue in the council's room tax fund. So 268,000 gets us what we need, and we've given you 3 different places to take that from. Option A being reduce your affordable housing. So if you reduce it by the $268,000, you just would subtract that from the $700,000. And you still have 425, and so you're adding to that. And I
You
think
kind of
I-
lost me there,
I
but
think I confused you. I saw the look.
So in this fiscal year, the council allocated $1 million to the affordable housing. Of that $1 million, what Ms. Lochner is saying is that there's 425 remaining in this current fiscal year. If that goes unspent, then we'll just forward it on to the next fiscal year, so that becomes your starting point. On slide 8, you'll see that originally 700,000 was recommended. Basically, the balance was minus the 2 other things that were recommended, was going to be added to the affordable housing going into fiscal year 20. So one of the options is to take the 268,000 that's needed from room tax out of the 700. And I don't have my calculator
So
up.
that would leave you $432,000 being appropriated to add to your 425,000.
Get you 857.
So, yeah, you'd have 857,000. It's not quite $1 million, but it does restore some of the funding in your affordable housing. So the proposal would be for the room tax needs, we need $268,000. And we've given you 3 different options of where you could fund that. And one is to reduce your affordable housing fund. So that would be reducing, instead of 700,000, it'd be 432,000. You could reduce some funding that we have for special events. This is where we fund, we provide sponsorship to certain events. So you certainly can reduce that, or you can do a combination of both.
So to add to that, Ms. Lochner, on option C, that would be some sort of split between reducing the special events support, which is listed about mid-slide on slide 8 at 550 recommended for fiscal year 20, and then some portion out of affordable housing so that the total doesn't come out of one or the other, but a little bit of both.
Okay, and then,
Madam Mayor?
go ahead.
Sorry.
Councilwoman.
My only concern about taking the money out of special events, when Alexis is not there, I believe they have already, the special events promoters, supporters, have already built their budget. Is it on, I'm trying to understand, is it on the amount that we just went through and approved? Or would that be the next cycle?
Next.
It
be this
is
one.
for the money that's available July 1st.
So it'd be the amount that you guys have already appropriated.
Councilwoman Jordan, I would,
It's already been appropriated.
I would also ask that the RSCVA step up and provide that, since it is tourist generating and heads and beds. That would be another thing.
And I would agree I would agree with that, Madam Mayor, and I know we've been moving in the direction of reducing that. My concern is we just went through a fairly lengthy process of ranking and allocating, and it would, people are going out and signing contracts and hiring people and locking down, the things they need for their event. And my fear would be changing it today is affecting people that we already allocated some funding to. Now, on the go forward, I completely agree with all of this being on the table and the RCBA joining us in helping to keep this going. But I just didn't know if everybody understood. Special Events Committee already went through the allocation and the ranking and telling people what they were going to be getting.
And this is Councilmember Breckus, who's the new person on that committee, and I do agree with what Ms. Jordan said, and she did lay out at the meeting, my recollection was, this is what's on, but nothing's done till the council, sets the budget, but that's a hard thing for them, just understanding how much work it was for them to apply and that they're ready to go. But, so I would be tentative on that. Also, affordable housing, I think we still have a big chunk in there. And frankly, well, I think it is a role for us to play. We rolled it out this year, and it seemed like we weren't self-directing on the options of how to spend it. It was people who walked in the door. And I'd like for us, if we are going to park some money on that, to have some parameters of how we're going to use it, and maybe hold it for a mid-year kind of program layout so we can work together to define what that's going to be rather than people walking in the door to make their request.
So could you clarify how much, again, are you saying we have 857 or 432?
If you take option A and fund the 268 completely out of the money we had recommended for affordable housing, you would have, with the 425 that's currently in there, you would have add an additional 432,000 for 857,000.
Right, but then you would take out the 268.
No, that took the 268. So I took 700,000, subtracted 268 to get the 432.
So we would, if we funded these needs, this 268, we would have a remainder of 432 in this account.
Plus whatever's unspent from this year, which is currently 425.
Well, that's where you keep getting me. So it is 857.
It's a total of, so what you have is you would be appropriating 432,000 to add to your 425. So it's 857 would be in there, provided nothing else gets spent this year.
I'll just weigh in. I think 857 is a healthy budget. I think the money's very valuable. We do spend it as things come up versus going out for an RFQ, RFP. That way we could retain our event funding. But what I really think we need to do is make a decision on the event funding much earlier in the fiscal year before the grants are awarded for next year. So they know what their budget is and we're not in this situation again. And that's what we had to do with the arts. They changed their whole schedule. So they knew how much money they had before they gave the grants. Not they gave the grants and then they're coming to us saying, oh my gosh, we've already awarded these grants. You need to fund us.
And to that point, I want to point out here, the Pioneer Center, we had that discussion. I thought I was kind of, kind of put them on notice that we were going to allocate that differently. So I want to make sure that comes off the table for 1920.
I think you said for 2021, Madam Mayor.
Or 21.
And so I'll weigh in here. So the Arts and Culture had a pretty thorough discussion. I'm sorry, I really haven't had a chance to get the mayor, to the manager about this. But what they had suggested was if you say that room tax is 100%, and right now I think half of that is dedicated to parks. And so that leaves 50%. They were proposing that right now arts is getting around 50% or negotiating. They were suggesting that they pull back from general fund funding and they just fund art stuff from room tax, but that they get a definite 25% of the room tax. And that way, and that we give them that money, Madam Mayor, the Pioneer and anything dealing with art, we throw into that batch and they allocate. They might come up with 0 for Pioneer. They might come up with 250, 150, none. They might fund Art Town more, and these are all recommendations to us. Jay for joke. The point of it is all of that comes back to us to make the appropriation. Theirs is just a recommendation.
Right.
So they were saying maybe they could simplify things without changing a dime for this year. Yeah. I'm
Could I
done.
respond to that?
Is that you,
Yeah.
This is
Councilwoman Breckus?
Councilmember Breckus.
Go
I
ahead.
think if the Arts and Culture, if the Arts and Culture Board is going to get this kind of, allocations and then have more discretion, I'd rather have another board have some discretion. I see assistance to the Pioneer as much about the culture and the historic culture as I do about arts. I mean, it really isn't the arts, it's a venue, and it's one of our most iconic buildings downtown. So if we want to bucket that money for disbursement by a board, let's put it over to the Historic Resources Commission. So maybe one year they can fund, exterior work at the Pioneer. Maybe one year they can fund somewhere else. I think the Arts and Culture Commission gets a healthy bit, and sometimes they leave out other components on the culture. And I think our architectural history is a big part of that. So if that money is going to get put into any budget, I'd like to see it go over to the HRC.
I think you make some very valid points, but I also think, looking at next year's budget, looking at some of these entities that actually can be on their own. Some of them are very, very healthy financially. Matter of fact, the Pioneer, and I love the Pioneer, don't get me wrong, and I think you're right, Councilwoman Breckus, maybe looking at, because I do think historically it's very special and it's iconic in our city. But I also think that, some venues are doing much better than others. And that allocation was supposed to be a one-time allocation for, I believe, it might have been an air conditioner unit at the time. And then the money just kept getting allocated. And so I think we also have to kind of look at certain organizations that are doing much better than others, because part of that too, again, with some of the special events, I mean, there's some that we want to start, with some of these startups, be able to, continue on and find other ones to have them grow and flourish, because some of them, quite frankly, are doing really well. So I want the council to remember that.
Yeah. And this is just a proposal, and it's coming late in the game, and I think it's worth vetting for next year if it would simplify things. And whether it goes to historic resources or not, I just want to point out, I mean, currently the chair of Arts and Culture is very involved in historic resources. I mean, this is her passion. This is what she does. This is her main thing. So however you want to do it, I just wanted to throw that out, that they too are looking for ways to simplify and, remove themselves from having any kind of demand on general fund.
Yeah.
So.
And, one of the things I want to say, and they're not going to like it, this is going to be very, very unpopular, but quite honestly, I really think, RTC, and I got to commend Councilwoman Jordan for just being a rabid champion, for our infrastructure. So thank you so much. But RTC, I think, honestly, they could really step up with that project and make it like the best that it could possibly be without putting the city in a position where we're choosing, this $300,000. So, it's really unfortunate. So maybe projects moving forward, they will think a little differently. 'Cause,
Well,
again, I'm talking about entities that, that's what they do. And I think, what, that would make a huge difference in that project. So maybe Lee would have a change of heart and help. I know they put some in, but quite honestly, it's the gateway into our downtown, and it's really, really special. And I think RTC could have an opportunity to really sort of send that statement and just, knock our socks off. Whether they will or not,
well, they already,
yeah.
if I may, they already did a special thing. Councilwoman Jordan at our last design review committee actually made a call, and they came up with another $70,000 to put in for the conduit for the lights to the trees that they will pay for. So I think it's a beginning.
Yeah, which is great.
It's
And
a
again,
beginning,
I
which
want
was
to recommend
excellent.
Councilwoman Jordan. It wouldn't have happened without you. So honestly, thank you very much. And I'm glad they did that, because quite honestly, that was something, Councilwoman Dewar, that they kind of said that they were going to do
I
with the
know.
lights. And many of those
I know.
businesses believed that they were going to have lights. So I'm really grateful that they, came
Yeah.
forward and stepped up to the plate.
Well, anyway, we're starting to swim in the
This
right
is
direction.
Councilmember Breckus. Well, this is Councilmember Breckus, but I say this every year, but on the bigger picture, RTC taking over local road responsibility with some of the almost 40 cents a gallon of gas
So too.
that they get tax would allow us to take $2.2 million that we get from our Tumwa right-of-way toll that we use for our local roads. So there is an opportunity for RTC to go a lot deeper if we make the decision we want to reform it and have them pay for local roads, which I believe they should be with that gas tax funding that is very robust and growing.
I think this should be right on the table with going to RCVA for events, even more important, like right out the gate. As soon as we close this budget, that should be, in my mind, Ms. Manager,
We
pretty
can-
top of the list.
Okay, we can certainly take that as staff direction going forward. With respect to the room tax options, then what I heard was to take the 268 from option A. Is that what I'm hearing? And then there was also the discussion of perhaps, although it didn't seem like there was complete direction yet, combining the 50,900 from Pioneer Center into the item line that's 2 below it, the Arts Commission,
Right.
adding to the 211. So we
And our
need,
town support, and art in public places, and Bicentennial Park. In other words, they should come back to us with recommendations. I'm not saying we have to make that decision right now, but once the budget is locked down, they should be. It would be good to have you go have a conversation with them and reformat it so they are making recommendations on all this stuff.
so the direction would be to collapse all of those sort of line items into Arts Commission where they make the recommendations that come back?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Lochner, in order to,
This is Councilmember Breckus. I want to argue against that. That gives those 11-member arts and culture members a whole lot, during the budget year, discretion on items than any single council member. And when you start to think about that, and that we get, 15,000, 20,000 discretion, and then Arts Commission now just got an extra, 200,000 to allocate?
They don't get it.
That just, no,
They get to
they're
recommend.
getting- you know what? By the time they have a group coming forward, they're called for proposals, talking to all of them individually, making their proposals, we rarely step aside from them. I just want to call this out because if the council does roll all that money in for those 11 people to have a lot more discretionary money, the council needs to remember when those come forward and think, wow, I wanted this mid-budget year. I wanted that mid-budget year. Just remember that we gave that discretion to them to add them up to about $450,000 mid-year discretionary decisions.
My suggestion would just be make this a trial year. Don't change anything in the budget, but just look for those recommendations and see if it works for us or not. That's, if like you're saying,
And
it's a problem.
My recommendation would be to let that money stay with the council and let the council make those decisions.
I am
But I
saying
think they
leave it.
do. We
Yeah.
actually have the final
Yeah.
vote on that, Councilwoman Breckus.
I'm not
So-
moving this anywhere.
No, yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm going to actually send it to our city manager. Did you want to say something?
my only question was actually for Ms. Lochner. So if the council did want to collapse those line items into the Arts Commission for them to allocate or make recommendations on, would you need to know that for purposes of filing the budget with the state?
No, we do total appropriation, so it doesn't,
Okay.
it's not project specific.
So we can make that
So you can
decision
make
down
that
the line. We
decision,
don't have to
yes.
say that right now.
Yes, it would just be
Okay.
important for us to know as a finance department, you don't want any of that money spent until that decision's been made.
But
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
But-
Councilman
A
Dorado.
recommendation.
Sorry, Madam. And then from what I heard from Councilwoman Dewar, it's not that we should make that happen now.
Right.
But something for us to consider between next fiscal year and between this fiscal year and moving forward. So we're not looking at collapsing that at the moment.
Correct.
And because I do think that once you have decided to appropriate all those funds to a committee, to one of our advisory boards, it's going to be very hard to then move that away from those advisory boards. And which, not to say that it would be a bad thing, but it's something I think we need to have further discussion about. Then to for the clarity, I think Councilwoman Dewar is not suggesting that we appropriate all those funds to our commission today.
That's
But something that we discuss maybe a little bit further during the duration of the year.
Like
fiscal
this year, we might get some recommendations from them, see how that works.
So it would be important to change the process before
Right.
the October timeframe, because that's when we start budget and that's when they start having those discussions. So if this is something the council wants to see, we really need to have those discussions in the early summer so that that direction has been given and we can put a budget together that reflects that.
And lastly, Madam Mayor, I think it'd be appropriate also to know that the Affordable Housing Fund coming from the room tax fund opens up definite larger conversations about the appropriations moving forward in terms of the needs that we're seeing in our community. I know that's always heavily weighted and it's always tough, as we had just discussed, and I don't want to get into that deep conversation, but a large part of that budget goes towards art. And it's tough when I go out into the community like anyone else to argue about housing versus art, and I know you need both, but that's something I think at the larger conversation during the duration of the next fiscal year that we could talk about.
I would agree, because this is the opportunity for this council to decide what is your top priorities, right? And, that's where I know it's tough and it's difficult conversation. So I appreciate you, Councilman Delgado, because I think this is the time that we really have to convey to the public why those things won't be funded. And so I'm just going to ask council members, this is the time to really show, now more than ever, we have to make those tough decisions. And a safe city is a prosperous city. And I think if, it is tough, and I know we all have our pet projects and the things that we all love, and it's uncomfortable conversations to have. But I think Councilman Delgado is right. You make some very valid points. This is the time to say what is our priority. And I know certainly for me, it's police at this time, and I would imagine. Councilwoman Breckus, I hear you sigh.
No, I unmuted. I just wanted to, and I don't want to interrupt you, Madam Mayor. I just unmuted, waiting for a chance to just ask, inquire, suggest that the money for the affordable housing, it doesn't always exclusively have to be used to subsidize either a private or a nonprofit effort. I think there's policy groundwork that we're missing on the housing component and the housing supply component. The Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency's housing study is about to come out. There's policy recommendations there. And it seems like sometimes those get short shrift from, our policy people on staff. So we may need to use some of that money to advance the policy piece of the housing crises.
And Madam Mayor, can I add on to that?
Say yes.
Hello?
All right. Councilwoman Jordan?
Thank you. And to that point, I agree with Councilwoman Breckus on this one, and here's why. When I fought for and we all voted for that $1 million for the housing fund, it wasn't just meant for, although they were very good projects, and I'm glad that they're going to come to fruition this year, it was also to start building a policy around how we can better get affordable housing projects going and get them more viable for those that are in a position to construct them and run them. And one of the things that I had suggested was, when we're looking as a priority to put affordable housing in the core, and I'll call it just within the McCarran ring, how are we going to build a potential sliding scale model on our fee schedule if somebody comes in with a project that is affordable, on the transit line, in the downtown core, maybe it's a rehab, and they check all these boxes, is what programmatically can we put in place to start spurring more of the affordable products we want where we want them. And I agree that kind of some of that set aside was meant for those bigger 30,000-foot policy applications to see if we could be doing something differently to help get some of these projects off the ground.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to that, Saber Newby, for the record, I think that is absolutely a possibility for the expenditure of those affordable housing funds, if that was the direction of council, to look at either, some sort of contract work to help with policy or to do any number of other services. I don't think that it necessarily has to be direct subsidy for additional units.
And again, Madam Mayor, my comments were to the idea that not to make the changes today, but leading to the idea that we start those conversations. Maybe it's a workshop opportunity before October about what is room tax. What can we utilize the room tax for? Can we enhance the current allotment now that's going to be 857 to further dive into what are we held by legislatively in terms of giving back to the arts community, because I know that's part of it as well, and 50% to the parks and so forth. And so once we have those numbers dialed in, I think that'd be better for us, but not to make the drastic changes today, but it definitely gives us opportunities in terms of priorities to the community and just moving before October.
Okay. And, the other thing that I would like to suggest too is going to the RSCVA, because looking at the special events, that's what, $550?
$550.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
More than art,
I
at
would,
$400.
I would give direction to staff to reach out to RSCVA to see if they would be, really willing to partner. I know a lot of cities, that's where they sort of put that responsibility is on, the Visitors and Tourism Bureau. And I think if there's one message that they could understand or should understand, it's so important to have police officers, or you can just say that people don't want to visit a city that's not safe. And that's why I think it would be a great collaboration with them to be able to, help with that $550,000 that we use to make that heavy lift, where we're really in the position where we need to fund those officers to keep our visitors safe and our residents safe. So I kind of think if I could give some direction to staff before, what's the date, City Manager?
May 22nd
May
is our
22nd.
adoption of this, and I will take that as direction and reach out to them formally. I know you and I were in that meeting with them, and I think you made a really compelling argument to them about the need for their support, particularly of the legacy items or the legacy events that bring in lots of tourists and heads in beds. And so we will certainly reach out to them again in that spirit.
Okay, I
under
would
your
appreciate
leadership.
that. Is council supportive of that idea, reaching out to them again?
100%.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, this
Yes,
is Devin.
go right ahead, Councilman Reese.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, I wanted to simply thank staff, the city manager's office, and Ms. Locke have been very patient with me as a member and someone who has not been here through the entirety of the budget process that began last October. I've had a lot of questions, and part of my reluctance to take up any particular position or to fight for any particular project is simply because I still have a lot to learn. But I want to say a couple of things. One is that I find much agreement with Councilmember Breckus in terms of where the dollars are and what pots they're pulled from. And so I'll be looking forward to learning a bit more about that and finding some opportunities to learn from Councilwoman Breckus about it, because I find myself agreeing at times with many of the positions she's taken as to where the money should come from. I think Ms. Newby and Ms. Lochner both mentioned that because the budget process starts in October, I want to make it very clear about my priorities, that I will be very vocal and I guess adamant about looking at ways in which we can help to improve the number of firefighters that we are putting on the streets. I'm concerned that we have pushed a lot of the responsibility in this budget, and I understand why, into the SAFER grant, and I'm willing to take that at face value and look at the other ways in which we might seek to find money for public safety. But I am worried that our firefighters, like our police, are in a similar position where they're doing more with less. There are fewer of them today than there were, in the history of our organization. And so as we look towards next year and start to align our priorities, I'm willing to support the budget, and I'm willing to take option A as the direction that I'm adding to the conversation. But I have to be very honest and say that I want to see us look at the ways in which we can support public safety, both on the police and the fire. And so that's really my thoughts. And again, I thank everyone for the incredible work that's being done. I have learned a tremendous amount, and there is much more to learn. And it's not easy. It is, as you said, Madam Mayor, it's about thinking about our priorities, trying to find compromise. It's about looking at the nits and details, and there are no easy answers. I do believe this budget represents a number of incredibly good opportunities for us to improve who we are as a city and to certainly improve public safety. And again, I think as time permits, I'll be able to look at some of the things more in depth and to come alongside the council and colleagues about the issues that they're passionate about. And I thank them again for their time.
All right, thank you, Councilman Reese. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, following up on Councilwoman Reese's points about fire, all this development, whether it's affordable or unaffordable to anybody, it's a lot more houses. And I have to believe that, and it's a lot more buildings. We're just spending a lot of time today on North Valley. So, 14 fire inspectors sounds like a lot, but at the same time, it's scaling up the demand very much like the police officers are scaling demand by all the growth too. So that's where I get worried. I'm not a good judge about whether 14 or 15 or 12 or 11 is the right number, but I have to believe we need more of all of it, to reflect that, our housing demand and our growth, whether it's affordable or unaffordable.
So, yeah, I can tell you there's not a department in the city
Yeah.
that wouldn't tell you they need more people.
Well, but let me just
But
ask.
again, we have to look at how we deliver service
But-
and how we do it.
Let me ask though, is that something that can come out of the development fund?
There are currently fire inspectors that are,
Inspectors.
That's
that
what I'm
do the
talking about.
building
That.
inspection work,
Yeah.
that do the plan checking, and
Yeah.
that is paid by the building fund.
Yeah.
Some
So
of
it's
them
about
are, not
half
all
and
of them.
half. They're
Yeah.
about half and half paid.
Well,
building
anyway,
fund
it's
and-
something to look at again in this process as you finalize to see if we have wrenched as much as we are legally able to out of that, especially since a lot of the demand is being driven by the housing.
Yeah.
Right.
And-
And
go
I'll
ahead.
tell you, we do look at that every time when we do the budget projections. We reaffirm what the staff is doing to make sure that we can fund it through other funds as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Okay. Deborah, just clarify this for me, and maybe I don't even know where I got this, but I want to say that 250,000 came out of the general fund for special events as well. Am I right?
There is a budget within the city manager's office for special events. The money that's in the room tax goes into the general fund to refund the departments for the work they do that's not covered by a promoter or somebody who's paying for the event. So yes, primarily all the staff is funded in the general fund. And then this funding really goes and reimburses the general fund for police and public works and, the stuff that's not paid for.
But it's am I right? It's a total of 750?
That sounds about right, because when you look at, the people that are funded in the city manager's office and the supplies and what they need to function, that's about what that would be.
Yeah, and I would say this council needs to make that very clear now, what that direction is going to be moving forward. Again, using our working with our partners to help us with that lift of special events when it does fall in under, a tourism entity. So,
Right, and there's
okay.
certain events we just have no control over. There's a lot of free speech events.
Yeah.
And this past year, we had some campaign events. They were going to happen, and we needed to support them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where this money comes back into the general fund to pay for police overtime and public works.
Yeah, and I
those
want to
kinds of
clarify when we
events.
talk about those special events to council members that I'm talking about the ones that put heads in beds. You know, those are the
Like
ones that
Hot
generate
August
room,
nights and
right?
the big ones.
Right, generate
Yes.
room nights.
The other issue we have is, as you know, the crawls don't have a promoter. So this covers the overtime that's needed for those events as well.
And I definitely think the council should look at, or the special events, you know, board, look at how those are structured, because I think that is a very broken model, and how it ends up sort of affecting, you know, us during, you know, those crawls, and making them be, you know, much more sustainable. So,
And
There's
we
opportunity.
are.
okay. Okay, great. I know that was a concern of yours, Councilwoman Jordan, so, so thank you. I appreciate you working on it.
So we do have some more presentation to go through.
Go ahead.
So we'll go past the what we did there. So we wanted to go over the capital program with the council. I don't know if you had an opportunity to read this. Is the same information that was in the presentation before. So we primarily, you know, start out with the the various sources of funding and what they can be used for. So this talks about, you know, the general fund, and we use our general fund project money primarily to build new and rehabilitate city-owned buildings and facilities. Our CDBG funds, we are primarily for to benefit low-income housing neighborhoods, prevent and eliminate blight, and the various different programs that that they can then manage. These are for the capital needs. The room surcharge, the $2 surcharge on downtown hotels, is used primarily for improvement on our downtown area. And those would be the facilities that we own in the downtown. The special tax, this is money that we can use to purchase capital assets and renovate existing government assets, and just not for normal maintenance. We also have some room tax money, so this has been reduced to, instead of 700, I think it was like 468 or something like that. So this is really is support for tourism. And we have various park districts. This is a residential construction tax, and this is various different amounts collected on development in the districts throughout the city. I believe we only have appropriated the funds for one park district this year. The rest would be retaining money for larger projects. We do have sewer funds available and street funds available, as you can imagine. Sewer funds are for sewer capital projects, and street funds are for streets. Yes.
So in between last budget meeting and this budget meeting, I had a chance to sit down with Parks, and their numbers are different than your numbers. Like where you have Park District 4, 6.3 million, they maybe only have 4 million showing in that fund. I asked them to get with you to find out what the discrepancy is.
So the discrepancy would be that they have projects they have obligated the money for, and they haven't actually obligated the money in the financial system.
Well, I suggested that, but that was not what they said. So I would appreciate, have you sat down with them in the last 24
I
hours?
have
or so?
not.
Okay, so that was my assumption as well, is that one is, they've spent it on their budget sheets, but not on yours. But that didn't seem to be the situation. This is a total income, and their total income was different than yours. This is a total amount. So it's,
So I'll
there
tell
seems to
you,
be
our
some.
numbers are correct. They
I
come
know they
straight
are.
out of the accounting system.
I know
and
they
we
are.
reconcile them.
Okay.
So I don't know what their numbers say. I
Okay.
don't know what they carry on spreadsheets, but
Yeah.
we take it straight out of the accounting system.
Okay, well, this is what I suggested to Deputy Manager Bill Thomas, and I'll suggest to you, Madam Manager, which is that I think Parks said the last time that we, council, looked at these parks projects was a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. heard different numbers. And they sort of thought they got a 3-year, and I said, we have to look at it every year and understand what you're spending, because these are things that directly affect our residents in these different districts. And so I really think that process is important, that you get our input, Madam Manager, on how these money, this is just $6 million or $4 million, $2 million sitting there. And while there are saving up for some larger projects, some of them are smaller, or, they don't fit in that category. So I feel like we should have some input on that besides just seeing a total number. Okay, so if we can make that happen somehow, not right now, but.
Perhaps we could bring back an item to just discuss park districts and the RCT in
Yeah.
general, where we are with them and what's the outstanding
And where it
project
matches with
list.
general fund. For example, I'll give you an example. Out of District 4, I was recommending that we fund some work in Huffaker Park. Well, come to find out, they already had $400,000 in general fund dollars, not RCT, that apparently Huffaker's tennis court is the next on the list, for example. So it's hard to look at them separately. It's better to look at it together so you get a fuller picture, even though this money can only be spent on a certain something, new things. The general fund can be spent on repairs. So, okay. And the other thing is CDBG. I think you went right by that. I know we have a CDBG committee, and I heard definitely through the grapevine, no minutes or anything, that some reappropriations were suggested for consideration by council. I didn't know when those are coming to council, so we could weigh in on those. So I don't happen to sit on that committee. The mayor doesn't. Probably Councilwoman Weber doesn't.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably a different discussion than right now.
No, but I mean,
Under-
I'm just saying, it's in the budget, so there's an assumption we're funding something here, but I'm not sure what.
That's coming.
Okay. Got it.
Let
So-
her finish.
I thought this was our moment to talk about this
I know,
page.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So
Go ahead.
those 2 pages were really just to define what the capital monies can be used
I
for
got you.
and how much we have. On the subsequent pages, it tells you specific projects that we have recommended funding for each one of these sources of funds. So for the general fund capital projects, it was $1.8 million. The first few things that we fund every year. So we have a lot of fire hydrants. So we have a fire hydrant replacement program. We have funding in there for fire equipment replacement, and that's not their apparatus. This is other equipment, light duty vehicles, and some of their other equipment they need to operate. The $1.5 million for apparatus replacement, I assure you, is in there in a different spot. We do various upgrades, ADA upgrades to parks. We have a capital maintenance plan for parks, and we do some ADA access for, we have a lot of areas where we need to provide additional ADA access. Those are typical projects that we see every year. What comes in new, we also typically will fund facility maintenance. What we've done this year, though, is we've increased facility maintenance funding. There was a little bit left over, and so we split it amongst facilities and IT, and we added a replacement roof for the Neal Road complex because it's leaking, and we want to make sure we replace it before it becomes a problem. So those are the projects that we're recommending go forward that are funded through the $1.8 million. For the CDBG projects,
This is Councilmember Breckes.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I stop you there with a question? And I want to say I concur with Ms. Dewar about looking at the parks kind of buckets annually. But in between the last 2 meetings, I thought we got a memo about the managers thinking on the fire station versus the police station and the acquisition of the RGJ building. And I'm just wondering if you could mention that and how you're thinking that works into this budget, if at all. I know we had money last budget that we were going to use to buy a parking lot. I think we bought some land, but we haven't done the improvements on the parking lot. And I just want to understand how that whole concept works with what we're doing in this budget.
So the, if the city does end up purchasing the RGJ building, it is not built into this budget. That money is sitting in our fund balance. It was money we had set aside for other projects that we held off on with this other opportunity. So that would come back to council, and we would have to appropriate those funds.
Okay.
So you have some fund balance you're leaving out there just for that. Shouldn't we just
right
kind
now-
of earmark it then?
No, because we don't know what's going to happen, and I would hate to take that and earmark it for
Right,
something
for
that may or
something
may
else.
not happen.
Okay. I'm going to send it back to you, Deborah, because I just was told we got to get moving on.
All right,
We got to
so
get through this.
with, this is where Councilmember Dewar, you wanted to see what the CDBG projects were. These are the CDBG projects that had been recommended by the committee. I'm not aware of some changes in this, but I will certainly reach out and find out if there were some changes that came forward. What you see here is, again, pedestrian ramps are ADA, you know, that's important. So you see a lot of ADA here, the ADA bathroom at Mayor's Park and the ADA bathroom at the Amtrak station. And then some various just housing rehab programs through HAND that are managed through HAND. But you do see that Evelyn Mount has a couple projects here. I believe that gets us close to completing the recommended projects out there with the HVAC system that we funded last year. And then we have some replacement playground equipment for Idlewild Park.
Madam Mayor, I know the Councilwoman Dewar had some questions related to the CDBG fund here, and I'd like to also recognize staff and also the subcommittee. The ask of the CDBG grant itself was almost triple from what we were allocated, and so a lot of the conversation, a lot of the deliberation to get down to what's presented to us today took a lot of time and energy, and I commend everyone that was part of that process. And that 1.2 is going a long way, but it's also going to hopefully finish up Evelyn Mount Community Center, which I think has always been a piece of that in terms of deferred maintenance. But I'd be happy to also answer any questions that you guys may have related to that as the chair of the CDBG subcommittee.
A question had just come up about Yory Park, and I wasn't sure if Evelyn Mount, you know, I didn't see Yory Park on here, so.
Yeah, there was Yory Park. There was also another park that we looked at in terms of trying to fund another process. But the conversation we had with our parks and the staff is that we felt that the allocated amount wasn't going to be sufficient enough to really carry over
Okay.
a solid project. And so we had, and maybe Andy could speak to that a little bit more, but that wasn't sufficient enough when we thought.
So you
coming
dropped it
back.
out.
Yeah, it just wasn't going to get us to where we want to. We want to make sure we brought a great project.
For the record, Andy Bass, Director of Parks Recreation Community Services. That funding that you're referring to was from last year's budget, so it would not appear in this. But it was to help finish the Yory Park project that we didn't have funding.
So that was, this is the current fiscal year we're in.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So we also have the room surcharge, the $2 surcharge, and you'll see the bulk of the money is going for the National Bowling Stadium. And there's a couple smaller projects at the Reno Event Center, and this is particularly for doing things on our buildings downtown.
Can you just go back to that slide
Sure.
really quickly? Okay, so the National Bowling Stadium, how much? Let's see.
So the event center is getting $850,000, and the rest is going to the bowling stadium.
Yeah, the bowling stadium, that's a very heavy lift. So,
But I believe this gets us close to the projects that we said we were going to do. I think this gets us there.
okay, thank you.
For the park districts, again, we said there was only an appropriation out of Park District 1 in this budget, and that is to upgrade the playground by the pool at Idlewild Park. Then we have some affordable housing funds, again, from the room tax, that's going to be reduced based on the discussion we had earlier. And then we have the special ad valorem capital tax. And so from that, we're going to add some additional storage for evidence and we're working on replacing the AG radios in public safety. And I'll remind you, the public safety radios are being funded through the 911 board for public safety only, but we also have radios in a couple other departments that need to be connected to the system as well. So sewer funds, there's $45 million. And you see the biggest portion is to repair and replace some pump stations. That's a big, heavy lift. That's a big project. And, you know, a lot of these are standard projects. Of course, if you wanted to, you know, people can talk about these better than I can. So we have just the regular sewer funds. We tried to list, you know, where those are in this following slide. Kind of gives you an idea of where some of those are. It gives you a little bit more detail than some of the descriptions. Sometimes the descriptions don't really tell you what we're doing. So we wanted to make sure you had that. So related to the collection system, we have some annual work, and then we have some improvements. Related to flood and drainage, you can see these are the projects related to flood and drainage where they're going to be. So you see Dry Creek stabilization at Peckham, some storm drain master planning, the Cochrane ditch behind Costco, some river flaps construction, and Warren Estates. So then you have some projects out at our shared sewer plant. These are projects that we have a governing board that goes through these projects with the operators of the plant. As you may recall, the city of Reno is responsible for the capital improvements, and the city of Sparks does the operating. So these are the improvements for the year. We also have some improvements in here for the Reno Stead plant. So that's the expansion and some upgrades for the SCADA system and some preliminary design on the reservoir. And then we also have projects in here related to reuse. So we've been talking about how we can reuse some of the effluent and putting, you know, by treating it at a higher level and recharging. And so there's projects related to that. And the final fund, I believe, is our street fund. We have about $15 million for our street fund, and you can see the biggest budget in this is really maintenance and rehab of the neighborhood streets. It's $14 million, and as you can imagine, with as many streets as we have, that doesn't go as far as we'd like it to go, but in complement with the funding that RTC gets for the larger roads, this is where we can really complement the work they do. And then there's a list of those projects, again, to give you some more specifics as to where they are. As we just say, we're doing projects in Northwest area. What does that mean? So that's Ambassador Drive area, Royal Drive area, 11th Street area. So that's what this is providing you. And then we'll really quickly go through redevelopment. So we have 2 redevelopment areas.
Could I break in
sure.
about
Absolutely.
the sewer fund? Is my understanding, and it is a council priority, addressing our sewer needs and our sewer infrastructure, that while there may be items in the budget in the sewer fund, there's also decision-making junctures that have been explained to the council that we need to, tackle, and we will be tackling when different research is being conducted. And I'm going to ask for a piece of information articulating that over this budget year, because the last thing I want to see is some contract show up and be told, oh, it was in the budget. And then my understanding is, no, I thought we were going to have a decision-making process about this or that, that investment or that rate study or so on. So it's just a request for information.
All right.
point of order, redevelopment's on the next agenda meeting.
Damn.
Madam Mayor, we do need to open the redevelopment agency before we go into this.
What'd you say?
Yeah, we have to.
We're going to open
it
up the redevelopment agency meeting. Please proceed, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Breckus?
Well, you have to adjourn this meeting. with
No,
public
we-
comment.
No, you can keep it.
I am
open.
here. I am here.
Attorney over there.
Dorr?
Here?
Delgado?
Here.
Weber? Absent at this time. Jardin?
Here.
Reese? Councilmember Reese? Absent at this time. You do have a quorum of the redevelopment agency.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Didn't recess the other meeting.
I
What
don't.
did happen to the other meeting we were in?
Okay, Sam, hold on. At this time, back to you, Madam Clerk. Public comment.
We do not have any public comment registered for the redevelopment agency.
Oh.
Well, then I want public comment, yes you do.
Okay, Sam, remember? Be nice or else.
Well, when you're so stupid, breaking the laws.
No.
Anyway, I'll wait till I get to my public comment.
That's not appropriate. That's
Okay.
not appropriate. So
Public
go
comment.
ahead, Sam.
Excuse me. Sam DNA Dene. That city attorney is wrong, you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're all wrong. That previous meeting was taking place, and you suddenly just stopped it and opened up another meeting. What happened to the other meeting? That is an open meeting violation that is beyond, and I've been seeing a lot of violations, and that one, these Reno students, you understand what they did? This was a meeting, they ignored public comment. If you wanted to get up and speak, they didn't give public comment on the agenda item they were on that I wish to speak on. It was a 4 possible action item, and I'm being nice or else. You know what? I'm being nice to the angels and God, not to these bureaucrats up there. Put it in perspective, these guys up here, I'm here doing it philanthropically because of my crusade. That if we had honest media wacko freaks back there, you would know who I would be on that side of the dais. I know these kids were kids. These young men and women were falling asleep back here, waiting for me to give them public comment, and I had a lot of things to say in my 3 minutes. You know what you did wrong, city attorney, you did wrong. And so did you, you did wrong. You should apologize. There's gonna be an open meeting law violation, and I don't know, the attorney general will probably whitewash it because he's a Democrat just like all of you guys are. This is really, really disgusting. And the dear mayor up there, who I actually was instrumental in her getting her position in the first place, making her electable and getting rid of the other guy. And she knows she's doing wrong. Her face is getting red. This is disgusting. This is disgusting. And I sat through that folder off. Put that thing in perspective. They spent almost 2 hours talking about $200,000. That's a lot of money, but they ignored the fact that without even talking about it, they gave $3 million to the homeless shelter. I could go on and all the money that they've wasted without even talking about it, and they spent all this time, and I'm cooling my heels for 2 hours. For 2 hours so I could get my public comment, which you denied. It was a 4 possible action item, and you didn't even shut it down. You just said, let's go on to the next thing. This is so wrong. It's so wrong in so many ways. So many ways. And Be Nice or Else, she wanted me to read Be Nice or Else, and I've read her favorite book, and I'm about 8 chapters of it, but these are the ones who are not nice or else. When you're breaking the law, and there's the media wacko freak out there as I close out.
Sam.
As bad as these people are, and the city attorney, the one who's, I'll tell you, the media there should be headlines in the paper tomorrow. Sam DNA had the gumption and the guts to go to the podium and tell them how wrong they were, the violations of what they did, and the media wacko freaks, they should be dismantled, tarred and feathered. They should be, they don't deserve to even be allowed in this building. Nice smiley face back there. And I hope you're, Mr. Schuweiler.
Sam, you do realize you can still speak on that item. We're just
But
opening
I
up the-
waited 2 hours to speak on
Hey,
it.
guess what? I'm glad you did wait 2
Well,
hours.
thank you for reminding
you
me. I'll
could
stay
be
here then. I was about to leave.
Yes, stay, because you come for public comment and then you leave.
You
We
know,
want you to
I'd
stay
like to
through
say
the
I
entire
apologize
meeting,
for my
Sam.
outburst, but I don't apologize for it because what I did was right.
It's
What I
okay.
did was right, and they were wrong.
Okay, Sam, thank you. Thanks.
Good show for the kids. I mean, the young ladies.
They like it, the energy, right? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, Madam Mayor,
And the
we're on
content.
item E3, approval of the agenda, if you'd like to do that before we finish on the presentation.
Okay, yes, at this time, I'm going to ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Aye.
All right, so for the redevelopment area, we have the RDA number 1, which is our downtown area. It includes the parking garage on Sierra Street, and that revenue from that parking garage is pledged for debt. So there's currently not sufficient property tax revenue available in redevelopment area 1 to pay for its obligations. And we will be coming back to council in the near future with a discussion regarding RDA 1 and some possible options for moving forward. In the meantime, we do have sufficient reserves, and we have some funding from the sale of the theater that will make the bond payments for this coming fiscal year, and a portion of next fiscal year, and then, we have a cliff. So we will be discussing that with the council coming forward, but for this budget, this gives you a map of where redevelopment area 1 is. Just an overview, so it shows that within the kind of general redevelopment, we are overspending that by $260,000. But again, there is a fund balance in there, so that's what's paying for it. In the debt service fund, that's where the issue is a little greater. You can see we have $2.1 million that we're spending of our fund balance in order to pay our debt service this coming fiscal year. So enough about that. Let's talk about redevelopment area number 2. This area includes Cabela's, the baseball district, Park Lane Mall. It's really spread out, as you'll see in the map. This one actually does have a good news story. It's starting to generate property tax, so it is starting to be able to pay its obligations. So if you look, here's a map that shows you where it is in the one little area that's way outside of where we are. The overall general fund for the redevelopment area number 2 is using about $175,000 of fund balance. But the good news here is you see the transfer from the City of Reno General Fund has been reduced from $850,000 over the last 2 fiscal years to $100,000. And that is strictly because the revenue is coming in, greater than we projected, and it's actually growing, so that area is actually starting to be able to pay for itself. But understand that this area has also a very small debt obligation as opposed to the redevelopment area number 1. So you can see the debt fund where we're able to pay the debts, but again, the debt service is $48,000. It's not very much. And then the agreement with baseball really is it's an agreement, so it's not in the debt fund, but it's a settlement agreement. So that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you so much. Questions from council? Any up there in the sky? No?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much. How about you, Councilman Delgado?
No, I don't.
Councilwoman Durr?
No, I appreciate it.
No. Okay.
done.
Yeah, great job. Always, Deborah, honestly, you really are a rock star. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. What do you need from us? We probably need to go back to Madam Clerk for Mr. Sam Dene's public comment. Are you coming back?
Sam Dene, the extraterrestrial representative of the angels and the devils and of God. I don't even know which one we're on now. I think the students all left because they didn't want to be participating in an illegal meeting. That's what they told me. If it was as bad as I said it was, they needed to get out of here, and they didn't even want to leave their names here. And I know why nobody wanted to speak on this agenda item a moment ago is because that was an illegal agenda. It's an illegal agenda. You just ended the previous agenda and went into a next meeting like that was, you left out 3 or 4 of the steps, especially public comment, and she's shaking her head. You can respond to me after I finish my 3 minutes, but I don't think whatever it is, it won't be realistic because what you did was not right. Anyway, I don't want to spend my whole time on that. I want to spend on my favorite subject, my second favorite subject. My favorite subject is always, of course, Sam DNA, me. It's not always about me, it's about Sam. But more importantly, and then those students should have been able to hear it, and maybe I got my point across anyway, about how evil, Trump, if you're listening, distribute my YouTubes. They're good for the nation. They're good for the world. They're good for Reno. So you got it, Donald? Distribute my YouTubes. Just like the emails of Hillary Clinton got distributed. Distribute my YouTubes. Are you listening, Mr. Trump? I know you are. Now please have the gumption to distribute my YouTubes. There's a lot of stuff on there, and I told all those students to look at them too. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe I piqued their interest with my presentations here. The media is so, in this town, is so rotten and evil, and no, does anybody want to come up and say, nobody ever does, say, oh, I like the media, Sam doesn't like, I like the media, oh, they're so sweet, I love the media. No, everybody hates the media, and nobody understands how bad they are as much as I do. They're evil, and they're treacherous, they're traitors. I don't even know what kind of punishment it justifies them. That pipsqueak sitting, look at that pipsqueak right there. Hey, pipsqueak, there's a pipsqueak in the audience.
Okay.
And I'm not naming anybody. There's just a pipsqueak in the audience. You figured out who it was, huh? There's only one pipsqueak in the audience, and well, maybe there's 2 or 3 for all I know. Anyway, and he's no more of a pipsqueak than the 3 The Reno Gazette, I got rid of all of their reporters, and they bring in what? 3 Sams. 3 reporters named Sam. And then they bring in another reporter with my last name. What is, and then that real antediluvian pipsqueak Brian Dugan, what in the world is he doing running a newspaper? What is he doing running a newspaper? Does anybody, is anybody having a good time besides me? And there's my good friend, the assistant to the chief that I nominated and got appointed, and then I see the fire chief has left who I got appointed, and there's Ms. Newby, the city manager. She wouldn't have this job if it wasn't for me, because I bet on her over the other guy who was ahead in the vote, and he got up and left right in the middle of the whole thing, and she got it, and she knows, and I've never even had a thank you.
All right, thank you, Sam. All right, Vicki.
There's no further public comment for the redevelopment agency board, so.
Okay.
Move to adjourn redevelopment board.
All right, thank you. I have a motion from Councilman Delgado.
Second.
Second from Vice Mayor Dewar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion on our regular agenda.
Go right ahead.
All right. I want to thank Deborah Lochner and Sabra Newby and the staff who worked so hard since our last budget meeting to get to this budget meeting and make all these last-minute adjustments so we could get there. And I would just like to make a motion that we accept the decisions and recommendations that were made here by council, forward those to staff, and have those ideas incorporated into the budget they present to us for approval at our next regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion.
So,
Councilwoman Dewar.
Madam Mayor, so are we going to have public comment on item B1?
Go ahead.
Is there any public comment on item B1, Madam
Sam.
Clerk?
Sam Dene.
Come on. You get 3 minutes. Okay, but you can't call anyone names.
Pardon me?
Can't call anyone names.
And you're overworking me today, ladies and gentlemen. You're over me. Now,
Aren't you glad you stayed?
What?
Aren't you glad you stayed?
Well, I had to go pay the parking meter, so I wouldn't get charged for that too. There ought to be a free parking space for Sam DNA for this. By the way, what am I on the public comment or am I on the
Agenda item B1.
the budget part of it? Okay, so a quick little part of the budget. I pointed out they spent 2 hours, almost 2 hours, talking about roughly $250,000 worth of issues. 2 hours, and I'm sitting down there trying to think of how can I put this in a perspective. First of all, Sam, me, since 1993, I have benefited and saved this city a $500 million. Does anybody want to even challenge any of it? Do it, please. Nobody ever does. $500 million, and I could go on. I saved the Air National Guard. They wouldn't be here. Burning Man wouldn't be here. Gigafactory might or might not be here without me, and I don't know if that was a good thing to try to claim credit for. But I've done a lot of things, and I'm thinking about how you get down and spend all that time for $200,000 of items. I mean, by the fact you didn't go out for a chief of police, to look for a new chief of police because I told you we want Jason Soto. That saved I don't know, $100,000, $150,000 right there. Why didn't you put that over into that $250,000 and save those jobs? I don't even know what you ended up doing for that to get that money. If you ended up firing those poor park rangers or whatever else. And the real perspective is this. The real perspective is this. And I'll put it like this. And I'm an idea man. This Wild Creek / Hug High School debacle boondoggle. You're a bully pulpit. You're a bully pulpit. You're the biggest bully pulpit in the area. You're going to allow the spending of $200 million to build a $50 million school, and you've never raised one word against it. And that school isn't going to be any better than if they took a vacant lot of land and put that school over there instead of this $200 million. Wouldn't you like to have that for all? You could even give more money to Art Town and all those other people and Edon and everybody else, people who don't really deserve it because their salaries are too high in most of those places. Edon's salary's too high, the Art Town, all of them. But the point being, there was just one example. $200 million you're going to allow to be spent for a $50 million school without even raising one word against it, and then you spend, I guess it's bait and switch. You spend half an hour, 2 hours talking about a $250,000 couple of items, important for those people, no doubt about it. But there's the $200 million being wasted on that school boondoggle. It's wrong. It is absolutely wrong. Does anybody in here think that it'd be a good idea to spend $200 million to build a $50 million school? Why does say, dear God, angels, devils, whoever's controlling it today, maybe it's the devils. That's it. I'm all worn out. I am worn out, and you've heard it here the first time. I'm going to go home and read my favorite book, Be Nice or Else.
Thanks, Sam. Good job.
No further public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, sending it back to you, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a recommendation that we direct staff to incorporate the recommendations that we made here today into the final budget that will come back to us at our next council meeting for final approval.
Okay, thank you
Second.
very much. So I have a motion and I have a second from Councilman Delgado. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay,
Another public comment.
Mickey, back at you.
Our next item is public
Public
comment,
comment.
which we have none registered at this time, so I'm just looking for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, good job. Thanks, everyone.